All right, man. This is episode number 56 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on Sunday, April 23rd, 2023 at 7:56 p.m. The day has been consistently rainy. It just stopped about an hour or so ago. Woke up this morning and it was around 5 a.m. or so. The cat and I were both sound asleep, and then the harsh crashing of the rain outside woke us up like someone snapping their fingers next to your ears, man. It was something else, but it's good. We need the rain, we need all the plants to get the water, we need the cars to be washed if we have marks or dirts on them. And actually, speaking of the cat, he just woke up right now. Look at that. I'm going to have to pause this for a second and let him out. So give me one moment. It's got to be some sort of record for how quick it took to have to pause the episode. I try not to do it a whole lot. I try to keep the frame of conversation going, but sometimes you just can't help it. But either way, moving on from there, like I was saying before, it's been rainy all day, so it's perfect. We get the feeling of wanting to be inside. If you don't gotta work, you stay in bed and you just kind of relax with the crashing of the water outside, man. It's something very cozy in its own right, and I think evokes feelings of nostalgia. I have that kind of general sense of comfort and being content, while the rain is going on outside. But so had work today and then went over to the cinema to catch a new film written and directed by Ray Romano, Somewhere in Queens, that I have not been hearing any talk of. And it's a real shame because I thought this was a pretty terrific film. I was looking on Box Office Mojo, and it looks like it only had about a 600 theater release, which isn't a whole lot. And to put that in kind of frame of context, let's see here. Yeah, only 602 theaters. And this is a new release film. And like I said, for context, something like Scream 6, that has been out for a couple weeks now, is in 603 theaters. So more than that. And even a film like Beau is Afraid, which has only 965 theaters. And if you want some comparison's sake to what exactly would be a mass-marketed, wide release to all cinemas, you'll find the Super Mario Bros. Movie currently in 4,350 theaters, while Evil Dead Rise, which is a new release this weekend, is in 3,402 theaters. So I don't know what the percentage on that is. You have to do the math on that. But if you have the opportunity to see Somewhere in Queens, I think you'll be doing yourself a favor. I've never watched Everybody Loves Raymond, but I always like Ray Romano as an actor. He's got an everyman kind of casual style that I really like. Somebody who tries to do the right thing and maybe tries to say the right thing, but it doesn't always come out that way. And that's kind of the vibe that we get here. We have this film where he and his wife, played by Lauren Metcalf, are living in Queens, of course. They have a big Italian family, and their son is shy and he's quiet, but he's a really good basketball player. And he's seeing this girl, and the relationship is, I don't know. I haven't seen any trailers or anything of the sort, so I'm not going to give away the whole plot or anything like that. But basically, Ray Romano's character is interfering in his son and his son's life, not in his son, that'd be inappropriate, and the relationship to get this scholarship for this basketball scholarship in college in Philadelphia. And it was a very good film as well. You see, you see a drama like this, and it's great to actually go to the cinema and see a film that you actually, outside of a maybe a locally owned or art house cinema, I guess, if you will, to see a film like this of just a solid comedy drama. There's no big spectacle. There's nothing flashy. It's very matter of fact. It's very well written. And I wanted to just talk about this briefly and say that if you have the opportunity to see it, although I imagine that most people will get the opportunity in their home, I'm sure it'll pop up on video on demand soon, or will be available to stream at some point, but worth keeping in mind as we go forward. I remember when the cinemas started reopening on a major scale, probably in 2021, I would say so. We're getting a lot of big films to try to bring the masses back, and around the time I had just seen the Godzilla vs. Kong film, and I also saw a film that I like quite a bit that I've talked about on the show briefly. I think I talked about it on the show. Actually, I have no idea. Maybe I haven't. The film Together with Ed Helms and the actor whose name Patty Harrison, and it was another one of these films that I just walked in and didn't really know much about it, but it was a solid comedy drama that I rewatched for the 2021 list, and while it ultimately didn't make the list, it was still a very well-written, solid film. Takes a little bit of time to get going. I will say the first probably 20 or 30 minutes or so is a bit rocky in terms of the writing, but once it gets going, it gets going. So keep those films in mind should you be going forward. Oh man, I hope this. There we go. Okay. The video started playing on its own, and thankfully I had the volume down. I've been getting a lot of ads for Hellmann's mayonnaise lately, strangely enough. But lately, the reading has been of Mr. Quentin Tarantino's latest book, Cinema Speculation. His first book, the novelization of his last film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and don't remember when the book came out. The film was 2019. I think the book may have been 2021 as well. Very good book, very good companion piece to the terrific film. And this is his first nonfiction book. So this is various essays on films, his experiences seeing these films, and other films in relation to the films he is discussing. So, for example, at the beginning of each chapter is the chapter title of what film he's going to be discussing primarily, but he also talks about the context as to the release of the film, reactions to the films, his, of course, opinions on the films, and Tarantino is such a strong writer that once you start reading, you really want to just keep on going through with it, because you get the feeling of it's very much a voice of his own. You read it, and it never doesn't feel like anyone could have written it, aside from the fact that the obvious, that it's a very opinionated book, of course. So a lot of it you're going to find yourself agreeing with and disagreeing with, of course. But as always, the perspective is the most interesting part of it, because oftentimes it can. What works about Tarantino's writing in terms of specifically this book is that even if whether I strongly agree or strongly disagree, regardless, the writing itself is completely fascinating. His chapter on Dirty Harry is one that I totally agreed with. His analysis of the film, the kind of whiplash sort of reaction that a lot of critics were putting on the film, saying it was a reactionary film, and he speculated that, no pun intended, that it was actually the critics themselves that were reactionary. And it's interesting, Tarantino is a big fan of writer Pauline Kael, who he almost, every time he brings her up, seems to entirely disagree with. And I think the difference between someone like Tarantino and Pauline Kael for me is that I find Tarantino's writing to be, I think, whether there are times in the book, of course, I disagree with his opinion. In fact, the chapter on Taxi Driver, I think I almost entirely disagree with his analysis of Travis's character. I'm of the mindset that if there were some aspects to his character that Paul Schrader had intended, then to me it doesn't translate on screen. And it's a film I've seen at least 15, 20 times in my life, and there are just some aspects that Tarantino speculates on that I don't agree with at all, but I think Tarantino is a strong enough writer that I find myself completely compelled in the chapters, whereas someone like Pauline Kael, who I think at times could be a good writer, and I don't mean any disrespect, to the dead, or, I'm not trying to, I don't really care if I agree or disagree with a writer, if I make sure where they're coming from, but oftentimes I feel like Pauline Kael, her analysis on some films is grasping for straws, and I don't think that a lot of the material that she reviewed, it doesn't, some of the reviews like 8.5 and Blowout and, A Clockwork Orange and Halloween, above me just disagreeing, I just don't completely buy where she's coming from. It feels incredibly forced and almost reactionary in a way of unintentionally being reactionary, as if people are, which I think we're all probably guilty of, whether we want to admit it or not. You hear everybody saying that this film you haven't seen yet is a great film and it's an amazing film, or oh, this film was horrible, this film is this and that, and I think instinctively, whether we want to or not, we have some sort of push there. You hear a film is one of the best films of the year, this and that, and then you see it, and right from frame one, you are ready to just get in the film and say, well, it wasn't that film. It's the same if you watch any kind of classic, quote unquote classic film. You watch a film that's highly regarded and highly revered, and then it feels almost like a pressure, which is, of course, to say if you. There are plenty of quote-unquote classic films that I may not be a fan of. I mean, I've never, I'm not the biggest fan of the work of, the directed work of John Cassavetes. More of his films don't work for me than do, but it's also important to understand the context in which, why he is a revered director and why his films are revered in their genre and of independent filmmaking. And, I think that's important, that if somebody is, if I disagree with somebody on a film and they have a solid framework of where they're coming from, that is different than just a shallow opinion of just saying that a film is good or bad. It's like, well, why is the film good or bad? And oftentimes, people, you hear criticisms of famous film critics that their opinions just aren't fully formed. A lot of acquaintances of mine are into horror films and have repeatedly dogged on Roger Ebert, and some criticism valid, some not so much. I think Roger Ebert was a critic who let his emotions oftentimes get in the way of his film criticism and would often leave not. It depends on the film itself, But anyway, that's a whole tangent there. My point is that I think with Tarantino, because he is such an opinionated guy and has these strong opinions and will go on these oftentimes lengthy monologues, or if you will, then sometimes it can be tricky if you disagree. But because I enjoy his work so much, that it is fulfilling for me. Now, I will say I find Tarantino as a writer far more interesting than Tarantino as a speaker. I've listened to a few episodes of his Video Archives podcast with Roger Avery, and oftentimes I feel like he kind of unnecessarily dominates the conversation, and I oftentimes get exhausted at listening to it. Not necessarily in a way where it's a lot of information. It's just well, that's a whole other conversation. Tarantino is one of my favorite filmmakers, so I definitely am not trying to give the impression that I'm trying to just be critical of the guy. I mean, I am being critical, but it's not of any sort of maliciousness, because I think he is a fantastic writer and obviously a fantastic filmmaker. I think in terms of his films kind of reaching a pop culture younger demographic, whereas where he can have these films that are referencing and paying homage to these older films, then you have a younger audience, more so than a lot of contemporary filmmakers that appeal the way. You can see a lot of 20-somethings or younger film fans being into Pulp Fiction and now like Inglourious Bastards and those kinds of films that they get more out of. Like you hear the music that he uses from a film like Battles Without Honor and Humanity, that he uses for Kill Bill, and now that piece of music is kind of synonymous with martial arts and with Kill Bill, and introducing it to a whole new audience, man. It's just it's cool, and I think the book, I'm just about finished with it. I have one more chapter to do, which is the ending chapter, I believe. And it's fun to go through and see which films he'll discuss next. It's primarily, it's exclusively 60s, 70s, and 80s films, which is the time where he talks about when he was seeing these films theatrically and the bills that he would see them on. It's interesting when he talks about a film like Taxi Driver being in the on the second half of a bill with a film like The Farmer, which wasn't available to the public until within the past year. Since its original theatrical run, and I think The Farmer is a really terrific film that Scorpion, I believe it was Scorpion, put out. That is worth your time. He talks about some of the other Death Wish kind of films that were coming out of the mid 70s and 80s, films like I said, The Farmer and Track Down, and he talks about Paul Schrader's Hardcore, which I still have not seen, interestingly enough. I'm a big fan of Paul Schrader, more so as a writer than a director, but some of his directed films have been absolutely phenomenal. I've said before my love of Blue Collar with Harvey Keitel, and even some of his later directed works I find interesting as well, even if they don't totally work for me. For example, some of his films like Patty Hearst and The Comfort of Strangers don't totally work for me, but I find both those have sequences that are really fantastic. And his newer work is hit or miss, but all interesting. His film First Reformed, that made my top 10 favorite films of 2018, is one of the best films in his filmography. Actually, his homage to Bergman. And then his follow-up film, The Card Counter, I like, but I have some issues with the directing and the script. And the third act, I think, is really clumsy. But overall, it's a very interesting film. And what is it? His film Dog Eat Dog with Nick Cage and Willem Dafoe is interesting. I only ever saw it once, and I remember enjoying it enough, but it didn't leave much of an impact on me. And he has a new film out this year, the name of which I'm forgetting. Something with a gardener in the title. I'm blanking on the name, with Joel Edgerton and someone else big in that film. I don't exactly remember, but that'll be seen in due time. But cinema speculation is completely worth your time. And speaking of worth your time, let's talk about the film debut of Mr. Steven Spielberg, directed from 1971, a film that I hadn't seen before, which is Duel, starring, who is the actor? Dennis Weaver, who is the primary character. It's a simple story. I think most people probably know about this film. Dennis Weaver is going, I don't remember exactly where he was going. I think he was trying, I think he had a, I don't remember exactly what he was, it doesn't matter. He's in California, and he's on the road driving, and then somewhere, out of nowhere, this massive truck, it just starts intentionally messing with him, where it's in front of him, the truck is going real slow, and Dennis Weaver just passes the truck, and then the truck passes him, and the condescension from there would annoy anyone. And as the film progresses, the malevolence starts to increase to the point where it is now a life or death situation between Dennis Weaver in this small car. I don't remember exactly what car it is, but one that is not meant for this sort of heavy impact that is going up against this massive gasoline truck. And it's interesting with the film is the way that this is directed, the anxiety that you feel as an audience member, getting completely invested into this back and forth, where Dennis Weaver, you just feel his character pacing on the road, where he's white-knuckled, holding on to the steering wheel, going 60, 70, 80, 90, and this going around all these corners, swerving across the road, and he has nowhere to go to. He can't, the truck is right on him, man, this whole time. And what's interesting about the film is that the way that it's paced is that if that had just been the film itself, that it was just this truck going after him, then I think after some time you would start to feel a tediousness to it all. But the film smartly does is it kind of breaks it up into these sequences. So there's a point where there's about a 10 or 15 or so minute sequence, as I was saying before, where you just feel the speed, you feel the anxiety of Dennis Weaver just trying to get away from this truck. And every time you see this truck in his rearview mirror, you feel just the hairs on your arm stand, this benevolent tension, this feeling of just anxiety. That's the perfect word to use for it. This film could be called high anxiety because that's what it does to you. But then he has moments where he outsmarts the truck. He goes off and does his own thing, trying to get some help, but he is, as the film goes on, becomes more and more paranoid. There's a great sequence when he's in a diner, and I don't want to give away the whole sequence, but as an audience member, we start to get into his mindset of trying to maintain your cool, but at the same time knowing that someone is just right underneath. You're right underneath someone's finger, man. You're just like, what is going to happen going from here on out? And it's fantastic. I believe this, now I didn't look this up or anything like that, but I believe this was originally a TV film that was given a theatrical release because I read that there were some sequences that were directed later to expand the runtime. So early on, there's what I actually think is a really solid introduction for the film is when it's a POV of a car going through, various streets and cities. You can see marquees and vintage restaurants, see all these cars that would be there as is, even if there wasn't a film being made. I always love that when you watch a film and they're just going out on the street and doing it, and those people would have been there. There's no setting up. They're not actors. They're just there in that moment, and these shops are there and stuff. But what the film does is lure you more and more in isolation to the point where even when there are other cars on the road, they're far and few between. It's all desert. Maybe it was in California, actually. You know what? I said that, but I don't actually know. I believe so. I didn't have any notes or anything like that on this, or else I would have because I wanted to get this episode out. But that luring into the unknown, into just, and we've all been there, I mean, how many times if you're in the highway or something like that, you just feel your car start to kind of teeter, and you just feel like, oh man, if somebody brakes right now, or you can't brake too hard, if that happens, then someone's gonna get hurt. And it's a fantastic thrill ride, man, with an exhilarating third act. This is the kind of film that you want to see on a big screen if possible. I imagine that this was my first time watching the film, so getting just the true sense of just a confident filmmaker. And this wasn't the first directorial work that he had done. He had been involved with television before, various TV shows, but in terms of feature films, I want to double check, but I believe this was his first, and then he would follow this up in 1974, I believe. Let me find that here. I don't want to get the date wrong on that. Gosh, man, IMDb's got to fix their site. I don't like with IMDb's new site, they have these tabs that are just director, producer, writer. I hate that, man. It's terrible. But, yeah, I guess technically this would be his first, film. And then he would do Something Evil, Savage, and then his first non-TV film would be The Sugarland Express in 1974, followed up by the game changer Jaws in 1975, and then from there, miraculously, after a notoriously tricky film production, would go on to make many other big spectacle films of the such, and cement his name as someone in pop culture above being just a filmmaker, being this kind of figure synonymous with filmmaking. And it's interesting, going back to the book of cinema speculation, of a lot of the filmmakers who are coming out of that time period of California, or in California, I should say, Coppola and Scorsese, Brian De Palma, Spielberg, and some of them taking influences from older works, older filmmakers. Tarantino talks about Paul Schrader and Martin Scorsese's influence from The Searchers from 1956, and how other filmmakers like Brian De Palma were just not interested in that and were doing their own thing, more interested in Hitchcock than he was, even though not at first, because early De Palma films like Greetings and Hi Mom are much more influenced by the French New Wave in terms of the way that they are directed, sequences in the film that go off and on these tangents. There's the sequence in Hi Mom of the theater group of the black militants, and that's a whole 20-minute portion of the film that feels like it's in an entirely different film of its own until De Niro's character comes back into it, and but that's all interesting. And of course Peter Bogdanovich as well, who I'll be talking about on the next Blu-ray episode, because Targets is coming to Blu-ray, so I'll be talking about Targets then, and I will be talking about Peter Bogdanovich then. So Duel is a film that is worthy of your time, in lieu with the great road films of the 1970s, of classics like Smokey and the Bandit, Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, I would say Vanishing Point, even though I'm not totally in love with that film, Two-Lane Blacktop, which is a different kind of road film. It's less about the actual driving. It's more about the interactions with these characters. I may have talked about Two-Lane Blacktop on the show before. I'm not sure. But Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, and Smokey and the Bandit, for example, are much lighter films and are more about these great, exhilarating driving sequences. Sequences that are made to be seen in a theater. And as well, Smokey and the Bandit and Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry have two of the best endings of 70s films. If you've seen Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, then you definitely do not forget that ending. Oh boy, it is something else. Both terrific films, and I guess, you can put Race with the Devil. We're talking about Peter Fonda, and actually connecting it to Two-Lane Blacktop, Warren Oates as well. So there you go. I wonder if that Blu-ray is still in print of Race with the Devil and Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. If it is still in print and you haven't seen those films, they are both worthy of your time. Two different kinds of films, and not just in terms of tone, but in terms of spectacle. But hey, actually, there's another great ending for you. Race with the Devil. What a great ending that is. Man, you don't forget that ending. But with that said, I never get to everything I need to. But that's alright. That will be the next episode. There's another film. Actually, there's a couple films that I'm going to talk about. But that's alright. We'll get to it when we get to it. We got a full week ahead of us. There's plenty to accomplish. Plenty of watching and reading and writing. And we're going to take it one day at a time. We're going to take it 1 minute at a time. We're going to take 1 second at a time. We're not going to rush anything and not going to, I wish it was the end of the week. I wish it was the end of my work week and I was doing this and this and that. Because next thing you know, man, you're going to be waking up one day and you're going to be going, I wish I didn't rush through all that, When you're younger, you want to be older. And then when you're older, you realize that it's important to cherish the moments and the time that you still have and be aware of your existence. It's very important. And that is where I'm going to leave this one off. So you guys have a fantastic week. Get the job done, whatever it is that needs to get done. Pursue your creative endeavors. Do not waste time with meaningless social interactions, unless that is how you would like to use your time. Then take the bull by the horns, man. I was going to say take life by the horns, but that doesn't make sense. All right, that will be it for this episode.